Hello, and welcome to Watershed Moments. My name is Rhonda Pindell-Charles, representing Ward 3 on our Annapolis, Maryland City Council. The first quarter of 2016 will prove to be an exciting and enlightening time for our Watershed Moments audience as we celebrate several significant milestones and events. We have titled our series of programming for the months of January, February, and March, Watershed Moments, a century of moments and movements. We will begin by focusing on the significance of the Rosenwald schools. In 1912, Booker T. Washington, nationally noted African-American educator at the turn of the 20th century, approached Juluis Rosenwald regarding the education of colored children during this time. Mr. Rosenwald, the son of German Jewish immigrants, was a man of great wealth, known for building the Sears Roebuck and Company empire. Mr. Rosenwald was moved by Mr. Washington's ideas and long-term goals to end the disenfranchisement of the vast majority of African Americans during this time. The partnership between Mr. Washington and Mr. Rosenwald resulted in a massive educational revolution. We're confident that you will find their story to be a unique human interest story, a story that exhibits the human condition and portrays the true meaning of the human spirit. And the Rosenwald School connection to Annapolis? Well, our Parole Elementary School, a school who this year is celebrating 100 years of providing educational excellence to our community, is a Rosenwald school. And today, we are very pleased to have with us as our guest on Watershed Moments, Mrs. Katherine Arthur Joyce. Welcome to the program, Ms. Katherine.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Ms. Katherine is a proud product of the Parole community, and she's been a member of the community her entire life. And we're so pleased to have her here today. And we're going to talk about the Rosenwald School. And Ms. Katherine attended the Camp Parole Rosenwald School right in Annapolis on the corner of Hicks Avenue and Dorsey Avenue. Is that correct, Ms. Katherine?
Yes.
Now, Juluis Rosenwald was a gentleman who gave a lot of money towards over 5,000 schools. Now, what do you think about a man like Mr. Juluis Rosenwald, Ms. Katherine?
He was interested in education, for one thing. And then he had the money he could afford to help the colored children and build the schools.
Absolutely. And Mr. Rosenwald was a good friend of Booker T. Washington, and they started this. Mr. Rosenwald, if we're all familiar, started Sears Roebuck and Company. So we have an interesting video, which is a trailer on Mr. Juluis Rosenwald that people can take a look at and see what Mr. Rosenwald has actually done and where he got and why he did what he did. Again, talking to Ms. Katherine Arthur Joyce, proud Parole product. Ms. Joyce, we talked about Juluis Rosenwald and his philanthropy and the over 5,000 schools that he built all along from Maryland to Texas. And tell us something about what do you consider to be important about Mr. Rosenwald and his philanthropy, whether he had to do it, didn't have to do it, and that sort of thing. Just give us your thoughts about Mr. Rosenwald.
Well, I think it was a very good thing to have been done. And I'm so proud to be one of the persons who attended one of the schools. And as I can remember way back when my older sisters talked about the Red School in Parole, which was located up what is now called West Street, but it was the old Parole Road at that time.
So Mr. Rosenwald started a movement, and he did a lot of good things for the parole community and other communities in our United States. And I think based on the Little Red Schoolhouse that you talked about, which is now, which was located at what is now the Double T Diner, started, and then we moved on to the Camp Parole schools. Now, we can talk about Mr. Rosenwald, but we're going to put the information up on a video on the history of the over 5,000 Rosenwald schools built. The video on the history of the over 5,000 Rosenwald schools built is a very good example of what persons who have the means can do to help an entire community and an entire nation. Now, Ms. Katherine, we're going to talk about now the Camp Parole Rosenwald School, and that's the school that you attended. Tell us a little bit something about the school and your memories and some of the people who were there. You can list the names as well.
Well, I attended parole school, and Mr. Charles Fletcher at that time was the principal. And it was a 2-room school. And you had the first to the 3rd grade in one room, and you had the 4th to the 7th grade in the 2nd room, with a library in between. Of course, you didn't have any bathrooms in the school, so they had outdoor housing for bathrooms at that time. And of course, the books were limited, you know, and you only had the 2 teachers. And of course, they were interested in your learning. That was the proper thing. They wanted you to learn, and it was an all-black school, all colored children. It wasn't anybody but them, and they were all in that community of parole that went to that school.
Now, give us some of your classmates' names in your school at that time, Ms. Katherine.
I was looking back at the pictures of my classmates, and my class, those that were in my class, it's only 3 of us still living. Mm-hmm. And they are, no, it's not 3 of us. They were high school I was talking about.
Okay.
But I'm the only one that's living. And it's only 5 in the picture of the 1st to the 7th grade mm-hmm. that are living.
Okay, wow. Do you see any of them now?
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see a few of them, mm-hmm. and 2 of them have moved away.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what were some of the subjects that you studied when you were at the Rosenwald School?
Well, you know you're going to have English and math, and you had history.
Okay.
You know.
And your teachers' names, do you recall them?
Well, Miss Parker, they knew as Miss Parker. She was Ardenia Bell at that time. She had not married. And
who was my 3rd grade teacher at Parole Elementary School.
Yeah, yeah, because she was there a long time. And then we had Mr. Fletcher mm-hmm. at that time.
So he was the principal and the teacher?
He was the principal and the teacher.
Mm-hmm. Now, in cold weather, did you have heat, or how did that work?
Oh, you had that big barrel stove. It was the boys would have to go out and bring in the coal to put in the stove, and they had to bank it at night.
What's banking mean?
Banking means that you had to put the coal on it, close it up, and then you would the next day, you come in and you start it up again. But you would have the flames in there from the coal. So all you had to do was add some more wood and then put some more coal on it.
Oh, wow. That was a lot of work before you even started school.
But that was the boys' duty.
Oh.
The boys always had that duty, you know.
Now, were you bused to the school? Or?
No, we walked.
Now,
we walked.
People walked, I guess, not from just Parole, but maybe from some other areas, or was it all
see, at that
students?
time, it was Parole children.
All right.
They didn't have other children coming from that area. And of course, Parole was big community,
Yes.
you know, mostly.
Right, that's good.
You know, yeah.
So you have some fond memories and some hard-working memories
Yes.
Of the school. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Right, well, good.
And we were concerned teachers. And as the community grew, then they started having classes in the hall of the church. Mount Olive Church had a church hall. And they moved the 4th and 5th grades up to the hall. And that's when they brought in another teacher. See?
Wow. So Mr. Rosenwald's philanthropy was very far-reaching and made a huge impact on you, even though I'm sure you never met the man.
That's true.
Yes.
That's
And
true.
how many students, we can't even name how many students his philanthropic efforts really helped a lot of thousands and thousands of students in the United States. And where would those students be without Mr. Rosenwald? Now, you mentioned a little bit something about the Little Red Schoolhouse, which was now the site of the Double T Diner. Give us some recollection based on your sister's stories.
Well,
what did they say
they
about
didn't
that?
talk too much about it because they, as Ruby used to tell us, she said, we used to sit in that school and it was halfway cold. And the books, they didn't have proper books at that time. But they had, and I was saying to Chesterfield, they never talked about who their teachers were. You know, so I don't know who the teachers were at that time.
But they were able to read and write.
But they were able to teach them to read and write. They didn't have all the basic things that we had when we came after, you know, and went to Parole school. See.
Right. So, well, very good. Thank you, Ms. Katherine, for sharing that portion with us. And there are some other videos concerning a renovated Rosenwald School in North Carolina that our viewing audience may want to take a look at some point, and we can put up on the screen. So our Camp Parole School is still located at the same location, which is now an apartment building across the street from Mount Olive Church. So thank you for sharing those memories, Ms. Katherine.
Thank you.
We're back with Ms. Katherine Arthur Joyce from Parole, and we just talked about the Rosenwald schools. And after the Rosenwald School, Ms. Katherine, you moved on to the Wally H. Bates High School, is that correct?
Yes.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Wally H. Bates High School and some of your experiences there.
Well, in the first place, we had to walk, regardless of weather. We walked to school. And of course, at that time, the whites were being bused. And of course, they would holler out the window at us. We were walking in all types of weather. But I can truthfully say that they had some of the best teachers in Bates High School. And the thing about the teachers is that they knew what they wanted to teach. And they would let you know, I have it, and you're going to get it. And you're not going to come out of my class without knowing what I'm teaching you.
So give us some of the names of some of the teachers at Wally H. Bates High School.
Well, I had Rachel Carter Smith.
And what did she teach?
She taught English And I've cried many times in her class.
And why is that?
Because of pronunciation of words. She would make you pronounce it correctly. And you had to stand up in front of the class and pronounce it until you could pronounce it correctly.
Wow, she was a tough taskmaster.
She was tough, yes.
I've heard that story.
And I had Diagla Brown, and she taught math, which I loved. And of course, as I moved up and I took trigonometry and I took algebra, and of course I loved her. And we had home economics that Miss Rudolph taught, and she was rough. She was rough, but she would tell you, you're going to learn how to cook this, and this is the way it's done. But you appreciate those things. Yes. And of course, you were not like the kids of today, because regardless of whatever happened, you never answered back. You had that much respect for the teacher.
Yes. Now, what year did you graduate from Bates High School?
1938.
All right. And how about any of your classmates? Do you still keep in touch with any of them?
Well, no, because most all my classmates have passed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you have very fond memories of your experiences there.
Oh, yes.
And they helped you to be who you are and what you eventually became. Yes, that's correct. Now, we talked about the Rosenwald schools, and we've talked about Wally H. Bates High School, but in 1954, there was a very important case, Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, where the U.S. Supreme Court determined that the segregation of schools was unconstitutional. And there is a film and a video out there that we're going to show and allow our viewers to watch, Rosenwald Schools and the Brown case in 1954. And we'll continue with our interview in a moment. We're back with Miss Katherine Arthur Joyce again, and we're going to talk a little bit about Jim Crow. And many people have heard about Jim Crow, and many people may think it's a person. Is Jim Crow a person, Miss Katherine?
No, Jim Crow is not a person. It's an action.
It's an action. And tell us a little bit about the Jim Crow actions.
Well, it was an action that there were certain places you could not go if you were colored. And this is the word that was used during that time, colored. And they had a little tavern on the corner of what is now Washington and West Street. They sold the best hamburgers. You could go in there and buy it, but you couldn't sit in there and eat it, you know. And of course, there were other places in Annapolis that you could not go. And they had a sign up, white only, so you couldn't go into it. And as you traveled around Annapolis, you learned you had no business being in certain areas. See? So the Fourth Ward was where all the black people went.
All right, okay. So you have a vivid memories of that. But that was during the 1920s and 30s and up until
the 50s.
The 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but your education, I'm sure, helped you to overcome some of the negative things that you saw. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit about what you did after you finished Wally H. Bates High School.
Well, during the Second World War, I worked at Fort Meade at the C&T shop sewing. And at that time, I decided I wanted to do something for myself. So at night, I went to Baltimore to the beauty culture school, and I became a cosmetologist. And of course, I stayed in that business for over 50 years. And then one day I talked to one of my old classmates, and we talked about, since computers had come out, we need to learn something about these computers. So I went to Anne Arundel Community College at 50 and took a 2-year course in computer science.
And you received your associate's degree?
Yes, and then I started working as secretary over at Broad Neck for Reverend Barbara Sands.
All right, all right. Yeah. Now, in between those times, you worked also at Crownsville State
I
Hospital?
worked at Crownsville State Hospital as a cosmetologist, and then I left there and went in business. I worked at Miss Adele Walker's beauty shop.
Oh, in Eastport?
No.
Oh.
Her shop was on Calvert Street.
Oh, in the old 4th Ward?
Uh-huh.
All right.
And then I left her shop and went to Corinna Knight up on Northwest Street.
Same old 4th Ward?
Uh-huh. And then when things changed, then I went in Mildred Norman's on Washington Street.
All right.
Until that closed.
Old 4th Ward again. And
yes.
many of those closed because of the urban renewal in the 1970s.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, you've had a full life, Miss Katherine, and you raised your children and bought a home, and you've done many different things, and you should be very proud. And you've enjoyed yourself as well.
I have.
Yes, yes. And we're going to see and show a video, and we're going to put it on the screen regarding Jim Crow and more about the Brown case in 1954. And we're so glad that you were here today to talk with us about your life. And we're very proud of you. And much of it you can thank Mr. Juluis Rosenwald.
Right, that's true.
Had
he not started it, it would not have happened.
That is correct, and at this point, we're definitely thanking Mr. Rosenwald in his absence. Of course, he's deceased at this point, but his philanthropic efforts have helped many, many people, and so we would like to thank you, Ms. Katherine, at this time for being on our program of Watershed Moments, and we're going to give a little plug at this time for our production in Parole that we had back in October, Annapolis, One City, Three Friends, and you were part of the Three Friends portion. And we're going to show that on Watershed Moments during this current season of our programming. But thank you again so very much, and we appreciate you coming today.
Thank you for inviting me. Because Wright's Hotel, Washington Hotel, Blue Room, Star Theater.
Ask Katherine, she knows.
I know because I frequent those places.
What you got to say about that, Mr. Chastain?
Well, I saw in there.
Well,
I was in there too.
I can truthfully say, in all these 93 years, I have been blessed, and I have an enjoyable life. I've traveled. I've gone most of the states here in the United States, and I've had a beautiful life.
Amen.
So we've been uptown, and we've been downtown, and we've been all around town, and we've talked about parole and all kinds of things. And Miss Kern, you got some other, oh boy, Miss Jones Kindergarten.
Yeah.
Who remembers Miss Jones Kindergarten? All right. All right. At Mount Olive Church, where they had their graduations, and that was a big high time. And we have a lot of the churches still in parole. King's Apostle and Cecil still there today, and Beacon Light, where Mr. Chess is a member. So and Second Baptist. We had many churches in parole that are still thriving. Capital Church of Christ down in Forest Villa. So we have quite a few religious institutions. And in town, we got the Helping Hand. So that's there and doing things. Did anybody remember the old Parole shopping center?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the stores in the, Miss Pearl, you know about the old Parole shopping center?
She worked
Yes,
there.
you did.
She worked at
She
Brits.
worked at Brits.
She worked in Brits.
So, Miss Pearl, what did you do at Brits? Tell us a little bit of something what you did at Brits.
Oh, I was just a salesperson
Oh,
at the
no.
Brits department store for 15 years.
You did more than just sell. What else did you do? You stood in the window, and what did you do?
Stood in the window.
Didn't you wrap gifts?
Yes.
Yeah, people used to wave at you. That's right. Don't be shy.
Oh, boy. Yeah, boy.
You remember, Mr. Chester, did you take people on taxi cab, the Parole shopping center?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
numerous of times. Oh, yeah, many times. Pearl, no, I saw Pearl. Talk to her. Yeah. I've been around these two a long time. Go way back. You know, we were in the church together for a long time. The trustee board and
You
all.
did wonders in Mount Olive.
Yeah, see that a long
Good
time.
old trustee.
Yeah. Only one left. You
And
said,
I don't
didn't
want, and
you? How
you
many
know
left?
what?
Nobody
I
but
don't
me.
want-
Out of the 15.
Yeah, and I don't want anybody to ever forget Mr. Newt Snowden, because he did wonders in Mount Olive Church.
Right.
Mr. Stone.
I tell you.
I'd take his job on the trustee board. when he
Yeah,
left.
yeah.
He went over the Beacon Light.
Uh-huh.
And about 20 years later, I followed him over Beacon Light.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a lot of places in Parole.
Oh, yeah.
Parole Health Center
Yep, yep.
and the Boys and Girls.